All right, hello, Viggy. How are you doing?
Hello, doing good. How are
That's
you?
good. That's good. All right. So I want to thank you first of all for coming up and helping me out and use knowledge and everyone else who's going to be watching this video pretty soon. It's really great that you want to spread this information and it's really great that you just want to help out.
And it's
So
great for you to make this and set this up for everybody else.
yeah, thank you. All right. So let's start off with the first question. Let's first talk about like the college like experience itself. So first, what college are you going to, and then what major are you planning to go into as well?
So I'm going to Columbia University, the School of Engineering and Applied Science in Columbia University. And I'm not exactly sure what I plan on majoring in, but at the moment, my top two choices are computer science and biomedical engineering.
Mhm. So considering that Columbia University is a very prestigious university, is there like a specific reason why you chose Columbia?
Yeah, so there are a few reasons why I chose Columbia. The main primary reason is, of course, like the location of Columbia. It's located in New York City. So it's a lot easier to get things like internships and to participate in labs and stuff like that around the city, even while during classes. A lot of students do that. And that's one of the main reasons why I considered Columbia as my top choice. But then it's also just a very highly esteemed college, being ranked number two in the nation. And because of that, it has some really, really motivated and top performing students who will push me to perform better as well. And also has really, really top performing professors with connections and things like those labs and internships in New York City. And this brings me to the very prime reason, which is the connections. New York City is great, and the students and professors are great, but the connections is what matters. Since Columbia directly connects you with like hundreds and hundreds of opportunities across the nation and across the globe, which to me, that was just an offer that I couldn't
Mhm.
pass up.
That's great. So there's a lot of people who want to go to Ivy colleges, such as Columbia. So is there like any tips you have on like how to choose a specific school you want to go to? Because there's like many Ivy schools you can go to. So do you have any tips on anyone who is watching how to pick a specific college you want to go to?
I personally actually don't believe in like dream schools. Like, I don't think that anybody should like think that this school is their end all be all and they need to go here, right? I think that people should have a top choice school, but then also have a number two, a number three, a number four, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Know that it's okay to go wherever you go, right? Like my brother, he ended
Mhm.
up not going to the school that he wanted to go, but he's now at the University of Michigan, at the University of Michigan School of Engineering, and like after seeing how things panned out for him, right? That's like it couldn't have been better. Like it's a perfect school for him, right?
Mhm.
And so my advice is to like actually err on the side of not picking a dream and just more so picking like a first choice school, right? And the way that I picked my first choice school was I actually made a spreadsheet. I made a spreadsheet of the areas that I was interested in, and then I put those schools' rankings of my areas of interest, and just if they offer it. Because some schools don't have it, right? Like
Mhm.
for example, they don't have a business school at Princeton, right? And so I wanted to make sure that everything that I was remotely interested in and things that I was primarily interested in were on that spreadsheet and the ranking was there. And then also look at the internships and the outside activities that they offer in those areas. And then once you put that into a spreadsheet, it's probably going to become a lot more clear as to what you should pick. And for me, that ended up being Columbia as my number one and University of Michigan as my number two.
Mm. Yeah, that spreadsheet idea is really neat. With that in mind, like, was there any other schools that you applied to other than Columbia?
Yeah, so Columbia University, I applied through the early decision process. So what that means is I applied the early deadline. The application was due November 1st, and the decision came out on December 15th. And it's a legally binding application, right? So if I got into the school on December 15th, I am legally bound to go there. Because of that, there are some strings attached. The first being that you can't apply to any other private institutions in the early deadline. You can't apply to public schools, just not private ones. And then if you do get into the early decision agreement, if you get into the early decision process, you have to withdraw your applications from other schools. So in total, I applied to Columbia University and University of Southern Mississippi, and I got accepted there. And I also applied to the University of Michigan and Baylor early, but I had to withdraw those applications before they could give me a decision because I had gotten into Columbia University, which is a good problem to have. So I'm okay that that happened.
That's good. That's good. All right, so now let's move on to the application itself. And this is probably like the best part of the interview because a lot of people want to talk specifically about the application in college.
For sure.
So the first question is, what do you think made you stand out in your college application that appealed to the committee at Columbia?
Right. So a general trend that I have noticed with a lot of like Ivy Plus universities is that they really, really care about like stuff you do outside of the classroom, outside of school, right? Like they care about things like a speech and debate or like your grades, right? But for the most part, things like grades and your ACT score is just like a benchmark, right? It's not like having a 36 on an ACT won't get you into one of those schools. It just prevents you from getting automatically rejected, right? But as long as your ACT score or your grades are high enough, that's enough for the school. Then you need to focus on other things outside of the application. So for me, I did several different like programs and stuff outside of school. I will say though, with the quick disclaimer that like on places that I have read and where I did my research is for the most part, a lot of Ivy Plus schools don't really care too much about things like volunteer hours or like working at a fast food restaurant. Not that those are not good endeavors. Like I worked at Topher's for a little bit. It's great to get the experience and just for yourself to know, but don't put all your eggs in that basket if that's what you think will get you into a school. But for myself, I did an internship at the Naval Research Laboratory. And when I did that internship, I was able to publish a research abstract as the first author. And in that abstract, I went on to make a research poster as the first author, and that got published by the American Geophysical Union. And I got to actually present that to the American Geophysical Union alongside like people who had PhDs from like Stanford, etc. So I was very lucky with that, and I was very happy that happened, and that really, really helped my application because in the Columbia School of Engineering, they specifically ask you if you have any research that you published. So being able to mark yes in that and show my research that I published was a huge like benefit for myself. And then also I did other things that are outside of schools, like more so like national cohorts. I did this thing with Citizen University, which is they have a national youth collaboratory made of about 20 students across the nation. And we basically get flown out to several different meetings and try to get civically involved. Then I also did this other program my junior year called Student Voice, which is a cohort of about 20 people across the nation, and where we publish our own like school experiences. We publish articles about education, and in that little program, we actually get connected to other programs that will help us, just bolster our resumes. And I did a few other things in there, but I'll save you the speech. For the most part, my main thing that helped me get in was my internship at the Naval Research Laboratory, and then Student Voice and Citizen University, and just involvement outside of school.
Yeah, those are some really great things. But for some people, who want to go to these top colleges such as Columbia, what is your tip for those people?
Right. So if you've picked up on the general trend, pick what you want to do, right? And apply yourself. Like for me, I treated my freshman year sort of as a trial run. I did everything that I wanted to do and was remotely interested in. Then I narrowed it down my sophomore year. And I narrowed it down even further in my junior year. And then senior year, I narrowed it down even further to give myself time to work on college applications, etc. But that's freshman, sophomore, and junior year aren't to be taken for granted, right? Freshman is a trial run. Sophomore year is when you learn and get better at the things you want to do. Junior year is when you get the real marks that will get you into the school, right? And so apply yourself outside of the classroom in your extracurricular activities. Apply yourself on areas that are outside of school entirely. Go look for internships. Go look for programs. They exist and they're out there. Just find them and apply to them, and then apply yourself once you get into them, because I'm sure you'll be able to find something for yourself and something that you can't get in. The worst that can happen is you'll get rejected, and I promise you, I've been there, done that. It's not that bad. I 100% recommend you to apply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are some really great tips. So now let's move on to the stats, like just stats on the application.
Yep.
Let's first talk about the GPA. So what was your high school GPA?
Yeah, so my high school GPA is 100.47 on a 100-point scale.
And with that really high average, what was your class rank?
Right. So I kind of got unlucky with this class because our class proved to be the record hardest class to ever go through Oak Grove High School, because our class had the most GPAs above 100. So my class rank was actually like 8th in the class. I'm still very proud of that, but our class was very, very competitive.
Yeah, that's a really competitive class with rank 8 with an average of 100. So what with that in mind, what was your like lowest grade in your report card in your entire high school career?
Right. So in my entire high school career, I actually don't remember. I checked my active student, but I'm locked out of that now because it's a little
Hmm.
too late. And
Yeah.
they have not given me a final transcript. They have like sent it to the school, but they haven't given it to me.
Hmm.
But from my recollection, out of this year, my lowest grade was I think AP Lit, which I got a 98, I believe. And
Hmm.
then I think my like all-time lowest grade out of all of high school was during my freshman year. My freshman and sophomore year, I didn't care about my grade as much as I should have. And so
Hmm.
I got like, I think it was like a 96 in um, English with, I don't, it's accelerated English. Yeah, I think that's what they
Hmm.
call it.
Since you talk about AP Lit, well, how many AP classes did you take in high school?
Right. So I took all the AP classes that were available at Oak Grove High School. I took AP Chem, AP Lang, AP Push, AP Calc, AP US Gov, and then AP Lit. But I
Hmm.
only took the exams for all of them except for AP Lit because I already had made a 5 in the AP Lang exam.
Hmm.
On the AP Chem I did do the best on. I got a 3 on that. But then
Hmm.
AP Lang and A Push, I got 5s on those. And then still waiting on the results for AP Gov. And then for
Okay.
AP Calculus, our school offers the AB course because there are two parts of AP Calculus. There's AP Calculus AB and AP Calculus BC. Our
Hmm.
school offers the AB course, but I self-studied the rest of it and did the BC exam, which is just a little bit more calculus, and we're waiting on that score.
Hmm. Yeah. So now let's move on to ACT and SAT. Now, we know the ACT and SAT, the future of these standardized tests is pretty, we don't know really, right? Some
Yeah.
colleges take it, some colleges don't, some colleges like really want it, some colleges really don't want it. But with that in mind, what was your ACT or SAT score that you submitted to Columbia?
Right. So my highest composite was actually at 33, but my super score was 34. And Columbia accepts super scores. But you
Mhm.
definitely want to try to get a composite about 34, 36. I would have done that, but I waited a little bit too long. And I kind of
Mhm.
like my practice tests, I was making 36s on, but I just had a really, really rough test day. So
Mhm.
definitely planning early is a good idea. And about those test optional policies, I will say be wary about those. I know schools like MIT already like have rolled back those policies, and now they're like you have to have a standardized test.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I would recommend taking one.
Hmm. So how many times did you take the ACT to get that composite score 33?
Yeah, so I took the ACT 3 times. I took it once in February of my junior year, then in July of my like this summer after my junior year, and then in September in my senior year, which is like the latest basically.
Hmm. Yeah. So a lot of people like really struggle on ACT because, you know, it's a really hard test, obviously. So how did you study for the ACT?
Yeah, so I just took several practice tests. Once you take those practice tests, I really, really, really recommend spending more time grading and reviewing those tests than actually taking the test. Right. So what I did, I used the practice test as a mechanism to learn rather than the learning itself. By that I mean that I took the practice test, I saw what I got wrong. Then I marked the topic I got wrong, right? Not just the specific question, but the entire topic area that I got wrong. And then I have this legal pad that I like labeled my ACT study guide, and I would take notes on every topic as if the topic was like a classroom topic, right? I would go on YouTube, watch a video, and take notes on the topic entirely. So that way, the topic would be ingrained in my head, and so I won't miss that specific type of question, and I also won't miss questions that are about the same topic worded a little bit differently.
Mhm. That's a really good way to study because, you know, there's so many students that I used to tutor who like they just do the problems and then they're done. You know, they're like done for the day and then they fall to the same problems.
Yeah.
So when you talked about practice tests, how many practice tests did you take when you were practicing for the ACT?
Right. So I probably took around 20 to 25 total over the like those 3 tests. I really only took like one practice test before my first one, and then I took about like 2 before my second one, and the third one, like I kind of went gung ho and took several like a bunch of practice tests before that one.
Mm-hmm. With like, you know, standardized tests, there's 2 types of tests you can take. You can take the ACT or the SAT and to submit those to colleges. So in your opinion and why, which standardized test, the ACT or the SAT is easier?
Right. So I have actually only taken the ACT, but I have heard that the SAT may be harder for like the English portions. But honestly, don't really worry about any of that too much. Like there's some regions that prefer ACT, some regions that prefer SAT. Whichever one's the most accessible to you, I recommend taking. Right, for me, the ACT was the most accessible. Most people in the South take the ACT. I know a lot of Northerners take the SAT. If those classes and those resources are more accessible to you, take that test.
Mhm. That's a really good point to point out because I never really knew that like North took the ACT and the South took the ACT. So that's a really nice thing to
I mean,
point out.
it's not like set in stone, but for like a general trend, that's what I've
Yeah,
heard.
yeah, I've seen the trend before
Yeah.
as well. So
And
now,
about the ACT, real quick,
mhm,
Prep Scholar is your number one help. And the ACT, Prep Scholar is amazing.
mhm.
Like use
And
any of those Prep Scholar articles, and you'll
yeah,
do
and
well.
I recall like Prep Scholar, like most of their stuff is free, right?
Yeah, it's
It,
all like a lot of it's free. Like they have a paid version, but all of their articles about like how to take the test, or like
mhm,
almost every type of question, they're all free and they're out there for
mhm.
you to use. I didn't pay a single dollar on like studying for the ACT except for buying a book, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
try to spend less money and just use Prep Scholar.
Yeah, that's a good thing because there's so many people who like pay for like classes,
Hmm.
such as like I'm not gonna point them out because I might
Yeah, yeah.
get sued or something. But like paid stuff, they're nice. But there's also, if you look hard enough, there are like free resources out there.
Yeah, there are plenty of great resources.
Hmm. So now let's go away from the stats and let's talk about essays. And essays are a little more difficult than the stats because like they're like so ambiguous sometimes. So what was
Mhm.
your Common App essay about?
Right. So my Common App like personal statement, my essay was about tea time. So every day, like for like the entirety of my life, my family, we all would just like mechanically meet in the living room at about like 5 p.m. ish, and we would drink a cup of tea. It's kind of like a tradition in India, right?
Hmm.
And like my parents are from India, if you haven't picked up on that. And so we all meet in like 5 p.m. every day to like have tea. And like this is the one thing that's been present throughout my entire life, right? Like several of my circumstances have changed throughout my entire life. And that's the one thing that's always been there. And so I
Hmm.
wrote my essay about that, right? Like I used that as my like sort of narrative opening into like a greater lesson, right? And the greater lesson for me was like tea time. It was a relatively like minor experience on like paper, right? But once you like think about it as like a whole throughout my life, it was really, really impactful, right? And so my like general thesis and like the crux of the essay was that like the smaller things in life aren't to be taken for granted because the smaller things in life are what weave the notable and more important parts of our life together. And so those smaller things in life are like some of the most important things in our life because we wouldn't have a life without the smaller things. And so that's what my essay was mainly about.
Yeah, that's really powerful because like there's so many small experiences that you never know will actually be like so significant until you look back at it. So that's really
Mhm.
powerful. With that in mind, how long did you take to write that specific essay?
Right. So I would say I've made several iterations of that essay over the course of about a month. I started it in like late August and then finished it around like um I shouldn't know, sorry. I started in late September and then finished it about like the end of October and then submitted it for my I guess for my application. The amount of drafts I have honestly have no idea. They're spread out over several documents that I share with several people,
Hmm.
but took about a month.
Okay. Because essays are like kind of hard to write because some of them are just some people are just not good at writing essays. Like me, I'm pretty bad at writing essays. And with that in mind, are there like any tips on like how to write like a really good essay for a college application?
Right. So first of all, don't lie to yourself, Kyle. I know you're a really good writer, okay?
Okay.
But I will say don't submit something if it doesn't sound like you, right? Like admissions counselors can tell. Like they can tell so quickly if you're writing this essay to sound like the ideal student. Like those like I hate to say it, but a lot of times those essays are essays that will get you rejected from a school, right? And so you really, really, really want an essay to like show like yourself and your personality, right? For example, at Columbia, they have some unique questions, and some of their questions they ask you for a list. Like one of their questions is like, what's a list of the media you consume, right? And so I could have put like a whole bunch of like engineering podcasts and stuff like that, but instead I put yeah, I put some newspaper sources and some of these like scientific podcasts that I may listen to, etc. But I also put things like anime and like Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse, because that shows a personality, and that's what they really, really want from a student is personality, right? So have a personal essay that's something that you wrote. Like, don't worry about having over sophisticated language. I actually think that my essay was like, it had generally like more simple terms, but it had like a powerful meaning, right? As long as you have a meaning that's like important to yourself, the essay will sound really, really good. It'll have a powerful message if you use your own words, right? For me, people, what funny enough for me, right? Like, I wrote several different versions of my personal statement, but I ended up submitting the first draft. And I know that sounds very backwards. Like, I know that sounds really, really backwards, but this was by no means a spontaneous decision, right? Like, I really, really, really tried to make this essay like what other people wanted me to make it, right? I listened to the critiques. The critiques weren't bad in themselves. The critiques just weren't me, right? Like, I'm not saying don't take critiques. Every single one of my other essays, I use tons of critiques. Those are really, really helpful, right? But for this particular essay, this personal statement, I have to just kind of roll it back, right? Like, at the end of the day, I had my final draft and my first draft, and I looked at my brother and I was like, read these two and tell me if you feel the same. And we both agreed that the first draft, which just sounded better and sounded more like me, right? And so like about like the day before the application was due, I decided to just make a couple minor tweaks of that first draft and then submit that as my like essay. But the reason I say all this is because like realize that like people's advice isn't the holy trinity. Do stuff that is like that you feel like is important to your essay, right? Of course, other essays, like you definitely want to like take advice a lot, but like don't make yourself bend your writing style just to fit someone else's critique, right? And then my main thing is for starting this essay, like starting any essay, is brainstorm, outline those essays, and then repeat, right? Come up with an idea, write the outline, and then repeat. Don't ever write the essay until you have a good outline. The reason for this isn't because I think you need an outline to write an essay. I don't think that's true at all. I think you can write an essay without an outline. It can be great. But to find the best idea possible for that essay, it saves a lot more time writing an outline instead of like writing a bunch of essays and comparing. Right? Like for me, for my personal statement, I had several different outlines that I wrote, but I ended up going with tea time because that just fit my like ideas the most, right? And then my last tip, aside from brainstorm, outline, and repeat, is to read example essays, then forget them. And what I mean by that is you want to read these example essays and just see like general trends, but you don't want to put yourself into a box, right? Like if I watch the way that you say a sentence, right? And I think that, wow, that's a great way to say the sentence. I'm going to want to say the sentence exactly as you do, right? But in reality, we would say the sentence differently if we had never heard each other, right? Same with essays, right? So you don't want to like put yourself into a box. The general things you want to pick up on from these sample essays that I noticed at least is like, one, most personal statements have in even like other essays, right? Like almost all of my essays for almost all my schools had a very narrative style. The only essay that really wasn't as narrative was the why this school essay. Other than that, they all are very narrative style, especially that personal statement. And then the lesson for that personal statement should really only come at like the very, very like end of the essay, right? Like a lot of it's build up, and then that lesson and that thesis hits right at the end when everything kind of clicks into place. And I can share my essays with you if you wanted to like look at them or like, share them with your people as like samples. I'm sure Hans would too. I'd force him.
Yeah, that's like a really good thing to point out because like, for example, like if I want to like write like J.K. Rowling, right? How she write Harry Potter, right? If she got into Columbia, like they don't want another J.K. Rowling, right? They want me. So that is a really good thing to point out, that you don't have to like follow the exact copy of someone because they don't need that person again. So that's a really
one thing I will point out for you, Kallen, is that everybody can write an essay, and you can too.
Yeah, eventually I'll learn. Eventually.
Don't underestimate yourself.
That's another good thing for all the viewers. Don't underestimate yourself. All right. So now let's move on to the last section where we talk about extracurriculars. Now, extracurriculars can be really diverse. You can pretty much do anything, right? You could do jobs, you could do internships, you could do clubs. So what was some of the extracurriculars that you did that in your high school?
Right. So as I mentioned like earlier, right, freshman year is when I really wanted to just try everything that I was interested in, and then I narrowed it down from there, right? So I kind of spread myself out across several different disciplines and then found what I wanted to do. But those disciplines are cross country, track, show choir, spectra, which is our a cappella group at the high school, speech and debate, mu alpha theta, which is a math honor society, and then beta club and key club, which are both service organizations, and then Boy Scouts, our newspaper club. And then I also did several internships and programs outside of school. Most notable being my internship at the Naval Research Laboratory, and then I did this other program called GEMS, which was at the Engineering Research and Development Center in Vicksburg, Mississippi. I did that my freshman year. It was more so like a week-long educational program. It wasn't anything that would really get me into a school, but it's more so just building my resume to get me into other bigger things like the Naval Research Laboratory internship. And then I also did the Citizen University Youth Collaboratory thing that I mentioned earlier, as well as the Student Voice thing. And through the Student Voice thing, I also got the opportunity to participate in this whole process with the New Teacher Project and the Center for Reinventing Public Education, in which I helped them interview different school districts to pick which ones got a $1 million, like a $1 million grant. And so that's another thing that I did alongside with internships and programs.
Yeah, like when you talk about the GEM internship, that is something that's a pretty cool idea, because like a lot of people want to find internships or like extracurriculars that instantly get into college, right? But it is something good to point out that like you have to do it step by step, right? You have to find
very much it's a gradual build. What happened was for me, during middle school, I was heavily participating in Beta Club and Boy Scouts, right? And I used that like little experience to get me into GEMS, and I used GEMS to get into Citizen University. And even though GEMS are completely in Citizen University different things, like GEMS is a STEM thing, and then Citizen University is a civic engagement thing, right? They're very different, but just having like building your resume by showing that you want to be involved in activities will help you get into other activities, even if it doesn't relate to that. And then you use Citizen University and GEMS and Boy Scouts to get into Student Voice. And I use Student Voice, Citizen University, GEMS, and Boy Scouts to get into the Naval Research Laboratory. And they use that to get into Columbia. You see where I'm going with that, right? It's like, it's a gradual build, right? Like you don't just start off at the top, and that's A-okay, right? Like just take it step by step and you'll work your way up there.
That's a really good point there. With that, all those extracurriculars that you did, was there any like particular activity that you like find yourself like demotivated or just distraught about?
Yeah, so I mean, like nearly all of them, really. Like this is part due to the fact that I kind of spread myself a little thin during my freshman year, but also I pushed myself to partake a challenging role in everything that I did early on in high school, right? Like even though like Key Club was something that you can passively participate in, I didn't want to just be passive, right? Like I ended up quitting Beta Club because it wasn't as like involved for me. I was the secretary in my sophomore year, but it didn't really do much for me, and so I did Key Club, and in Key Club I became the lieutenant governor, which means that I was in charge of Key Club across like not just Oak Grove High School's Key Club, but I was in charge of Key Clubs in the entire district, right? And so like as my involvement as my like number of activities that I participated like narrowed, right, I pushed myself to partake more challenging roles in those extracurriculars, because to me the extracurricular isn't worth my time if it's not challenging. So make everything challenging by trying your hardest to be as successful as you can be in every extracurricular. Speech and debate, that was incredibly challenging. I mean, you know this for sure. Like, even if you do well on one circuit or one tournament, going to the next tournament may be a challenge. Going to the state level may be a challenge. Going to the national level is 100,000% a challenge, right? And it's okay if you don't do as great as you want to, but if you're challenging yourself, you're growing. That's the main thing that matters.
With that in mind, I want to like sneak in like a question from our Instagram. On our Instagram, you can follow our Instagram in the description below. Let me just put that in there. But like there was a person on our Instagram page asked, like, with that in mind, how did you stay motivated to like study and to further on like do anything in high school, really?
Right. So there's one thing that I believe about like work momentum over planning, but I'll talk about that later on, where you talk about like the procedures of studying. The main thing about motivation for me is this process that I learned about my freshman year called chunking, right? I'd like to preface that by saying that it's not weird to look up like basic questions like how to stay motivated or how to feel good about what you're doing. Like that's okay to look for advice on that. And that's exactly what I did my freshman year. And that's how I discovered this process called chunking, right? It's something that we all probably do like subconsciously, but once you consciously chunk your activities, It helped me at least, right? So what it means is that like you break your bigger goals into smaller goals, and then you break those smaller goals into even smaller goals. You break it into like these like daily bite-sized things that you can complete, and so that way you can be happy with the progress you've made in the like in the day, right? And so it's about shifting your perspective from a perfection positive perspective to a more progress positive perspective. It's being happy with the progress you made, right? At the end of the day, schools really, really, really care about like seeing that you've grown, right? Like for me, like my GPA going into my junior year was like a 98.27. I was 27th in my class, right? And even though I didn't finish number one in my class, I finished 8th in my class with 100.47 GPA, right? And so like, sure, like they may care about being first over being 8th, but they really, really, really care about seeing that growth over time. They cared about seeing my English grades go from like a 96 to like to 100, like and stuff like that throughout like my high school career. They care about seeing that growth, right? And so my point is, like, as long as you're growing, as long as you're making progress, be positive about that, be happy with that, and break your tasks into smaller tasks. And that way you have different goals that you can achieve, right? Once you achieve a goal, even if it's a small goal, you'll feel a lot better about yourself than thinking that you're like leagues and leagues away from reaching that goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's a really good way to study. You know, for me, I just don't study. But let's move on to some like really fun questions related to high school, because you know we had a really productive interview. If describe your high school experience with just, I know it's like really big, like there's a lot of stuff you did.
Yeah.
One word.
I would say gritty. That's because like it takes a lot of grit to like to continually involve yourself, right? Like that's the hardest part about it is is the length and like the continuation, right? Like it's easy to jump into high school gung ho, but it's hard to stay gung ho throughout the end. But I promise you, if you do, it'll all be worth it. It'll all pay out, even if it doesn't seem like it will. Like my brother was gung ho. It didn't seem like it paid off because, you know, he didn't get to where he wanted to go, but he ended up getting into the University of Michigan on their highest engineering scholarship, right? Like it may not have been in the form that he had thought it would be, but it pays off. I promise you. So staying gung ho is the hardest part about it. And that's why I would describe it as gritty.
And, you know, high school, even though like you worked really hard, I'm pretty sure, hopefully there are some fun moments in your high school life, right? So if I gave you the chance to just relive one more moment before you go to college, just one more moment in high school, what would it be?
You know, absolutely. So like this kind of goes back to my personal statement about the smaller things in life. Like I really, really value the smaller experiences, right? Like one of my friends kind of put it best, right? Like after his time in speech and debate, right? The things that he is going to like keep with them aren't like the numerous trophies that he achieved, but it's like the little cards that people gave him, or like, you know, like the friendship that he made, right? And so for me, it's kind of like for high school, like sure, I could relive like big moments like our state championship win my freshman year, etc., whatever. But I would probably want to relive just like playing funny enough, playing football or ultimate frisbee with my friends like in my yard. Like those types of memories. Like I had like the last time that I played football with them, I didn't realize that it would be the last time that I played football with them. Does that make sense? And so it's a lot more meaningful than you realize. Yeah,
that's really powerful because like, you know, so many people just focus on the big things and never focus really on the small things. So that's just for everyone else to really appreciate the things you are experiencing. I know we touched on this earlier, but just one more time, like how specifically did you study, and like, you know, relating to chunking, and was it really like productive sometimes, or sometimes it just didn't work?
Right. So the way I chunked out my tasks was I made it like something that I could do every day, like a weekly goal, right? And like that doesn't mean like I like wrote down weekly goals. It means it's like something that I just kind of like did in my head, sort of subconsciously, sort of consciously, right? Just like I just kept it in my head, it was there. And then the thing that I did write down though was a to-do list every single day, right? I didn't write it down on paper. I used like things like Microsoft To Do or like Apple reminders, etc. Whichever, depending on whatever computer I had at the time, I would use Microsoft or Apple, right? But I used those to give myself a to-do list for the day. And that way I got everything that I needed to get done. And so then by the end of the week, I had everything I needed for the week to be done. And with that chunking, right? Like the chunking is important, and you can plan out like every single like hour every day and how and when you're going to accomplish every single little goal, right? But there are like two really, really important things that you have to like know, right? Like number one, it's okay if you don't complete everything that you want to do. Like it's completely okay. Everybody has those weeks. Even if those weeks happen consecutively, it happens. Okay. And then number two is that for me personally, planning out every hour of my day just wasn't really the way to go. I realized that like planning my work is demotivating to me. Like I plan that I need to do stuff, right? But sometimes like when you have such a strict plan, you take a small break, that small break kind of becomes like a catalyst for you like going into a slump and wanting a longer break, right? So I started valuing things like work momentum over planning. So what that means is like I completed some work, right? And even though complete, I still like am in the groove of doing work and I'm not really too tired. So it's okay if I take on a little bit more. It's okay if I, keep going, right? And you don't have to like follow some strict plan. Just use that work momentum. And when you feel like taking a break, take a break. But then that way it's a natural break. And so you naturally will be able to feel, like well rested soon enough instead of having to want a longer and longer break, right? Like, for example, like my prime example of work momentum was like my senior year, I started going to the gym and I went from the school directly to the gym. Now I'm not in school, so it's a lot harder to go to the gym, which sounds funny, but I've gone to the gym a lot less time now during the summer than I have during school. That's because during school I had that work momentum. I went from school to the gym. And work momentum is like a huge, huge thing. Once I grasped work momentum is once I really, really started making progress throughout high school.
Yeah, we really only have like 3 minutes of the meeting, but luckily we finished all the questions.
Yeah.
So I really want to thank you again because like those are some really good answers that can really help a lot of people. With only 2 minutes left, was there any like just one message, like one chance to say anything to all of our viewers before we leave?
Have fun. Like all of these goals are important and all, but it doesn't matter if you don't remember your high school, if you don't have fun. Like there are plenty of people who are like, only do this, only do that. But at the end of the day, I know Hans and I had fun. I know a lot of other people who got into the school to have fun. And I know you can't. Have fun, work hard, and do your best.